It's really a shame that Agent was never released. Rockstar have proven themselves numerous times they can make a good game that isn't Grand Theft Auto, and the spy action genre could have used something new. Agent was going to be set during the Cold War era, and it would have taken heavy inspiration from classic British spy films and TV shows such as James Bond and The Professionals. This would have been unique for the genre, especially since a lot of the Bond games that we got after GoldenEye have unfortunately been hit or miss. But unfortunately for Agent, it must have just been plagued with issues during its development. Game Informer's associate editor Blake Hester wrote a fantastic article about this, and I think more people should know about this since it goes into some of the issues that Rockstar employees were facing early on in Agent's development. Now, this would have been during Agent's first development cycle in the early 2000s. Before the game was a PlayStation 3 exclusive, it was originally being developed for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox by Rockstar San Diego. Now, Hester previously wrote a great Polygon article about Agent, and his stories and knowledge about this game gained from these interviews with former Rockstar staff have proven to be invaluable. For Game Informer, Hester wrote about Rockstar's plans for handling the locations that missions in Agent were going to take place in, and how he would travel around between them. Washington, D.C. was going to be the main hub, with other cities being available to travel to from there. Cairo was one of these locations, but they were having some problems with finding reference images of Cairo. Now you gotta remember, this is going back to the early 2000s. It would have been more difficult finding good images showing exactly what certain places look like. So therefore, what better way is there to solve this issue than to book a trip and fly directly to Egypt yourself to take your own reference photos? Sounds innocent enough, right? According to Hester's article, environment artists Joe Sanabria and William Kidwell, art director Charles Morrow, and lead artist Daryl Gallagher all flew out to Cairo with a list of places that they needed to take pictures of, and they hired drivers who could act as translators and give them some knowledge of the city, things that only the locals know. Over 12,000 pictures were taken in the 2 weeks that they spent in Cairo. And this all sounds like a pretty sweet task, doesn't it? Think about it, your company pays for you to go to another country to take pictures. It's like your job is basically to be a tourist. I mean, damn, the only other people who are lucky enough to get to do that are people who host travel shows. But as it turns out, Egypt has some pretty strict laws regarding public photography. The US State Department website mentions that it's illegal to photograph police stations, military barracks, and other public buildings which are considered sensitive locations. The British government goes even more in-depth on their website, saying that even photography near places like military installations is strictly prohibited. It also states that British nationals have been arrested for taking pictures of electricity stations, train stations, and bridges. Now, according to Hester, the team at Rockstar had read all about this prior to going, and they figured that they would just take their chances since, according to them, it's not like they could just change the location of the game from Cairo to something else. I guess for the story that they already had set for Agent meant that it had to be in Cairo. But they still came across officials who did not like them taking pictures. Sanabria told Hester at one point that a Rockstar employee had a gun pulled on him by an official after he was caught taking pictures. Then they ended up confiscating the ID of one of their guides, and the cops later showed up to this guy's home and picked him up for questioning on the activities of these strange visitors who were insisting on taking pictures of everything. Keep in mind, they're not just taking pictures of the usual tourist locations in Egypt, they're taking pictures of literally everything they could. It's how they wanted to nail the feel of the location when they go to actually make it in the game, but the problem is, it just looked way too suspicious to officials out there. By the way, after this, they called up the US Embassy to talk to them about it, and it turns out that they could have been going around taking pictures of all this stuff. The problem is they were required to fill out a lot of paperwork in order to be able to get permission to do this and to get armed guards to escort them. This most likely had to be done during the trip planning stages. You know, before they entered the country. Not while they're already there and bringing attention to themselves and getting in trouble for taking pictures of places that they're not supposed to photograph. Soon after their tour guide got picked up by the cops, the Rockstar employees received a call and were told that they weren't allowed to leave their hotel rooms. The article does mention that things like attacks against tourists had been common back then, so maybe this could have been seen as a move to just protect the employees for their own good. But then the really big problems began when they were at the airport trying to go back home to San Diego. The team were accused of being in Egypt to film some pretty illegal content. Now, of course, they weren't, but it didn't help when one of their laptops was discovered to contain pictures of reproductive organs, because the laptop, according to Hester's article, had been borrowed from one of the developer's fathers, who was a gynecological oncologist. He was apparently keeping those pictures on his laptop for research purposes. Thankfully, though, everybody was able to make it home safe and sound, but the experience obviously frightened the hell out of them. It was a very good article, and I would highly suggest reading it in full because it is a pretty crazy story. And honestly, it would probably even make a good movie. Hell, it would have the perfect punchline at the end too. Think about it. All that stuff they went through, getting a gun pulled on them, their tour guide having his ID confiscated, being told not to leave their hotel room, being accused of filming pornography, and the game never even ended up being finished. And that's really too bad. I think we're long overdue for another really good spy thriller game. Now, what do you think about this? I can't say whether or not this experience was worth it for these guys, but hey, at least they got a paid trip out of it.